Zack Snyder's Justice League, a film that rose from the ashes and did great with both critics and general audiences despite the manufactured division and hate campaign against it leading up to its release. Well, you read the title, and today we'll be defending the formation of Zack Snyder's Justice League. Not the league as a whole in the movies, but how they were introduced and united, starting in BvS, leading up to Snyder's Justice League. You guys all know the regurgitated drone criticism at this point, that they jammed everything into BvS, even though the very brief introduction to the league members made sense and would be expanded upon later. Lex Luthor has enough interest in MetaHuman to do research on them. It's honestly something that someone with high world status would do, similar to what Amanda Waller or Batman ended up doing at the end of the first Squad movie. And in terms of the word overstuffing, this scene introducing the League only lasted 3 minutes. You see, look at the length of this clip I downloaded. A quick 3 minutes apparently justifies the word overstuffing when it's pretty much just cheeses. But whatever, I guess you're only supposed to hold the audience hostage for 10 minutes after the movie ends and shove those things at the back of the credits because Mickey Mouse said so. The only League member that could even arguably be called so-called crammed into this movie was Wonder Woman when she came to fight Doomsday. I guess the critics wanted a strong being like Wonder Woman to sit this one out, and I bet those same critics would have complained if she didn't show up and sat it out. Oh, they're cramming her into this movie by having her show up to fight a great world-endangering threat in an alternate reality. OMG, Wonder Woman existed off the island this whole time and didn't help Superman with Doomsday? Dumb Snyder! Because what do you know, that actually ended up being an actual talking point of these screwballs once General Sconwick was revealed to be Martian Manhunter. You just can't win with these chronically online copy and pasted opinion flip-flop losers. But anyway, she would get her own movie just a year or so after, so really, what better way to introduce the most iconic female superhero in history than to show her saving the world? Anyway, that solo outing would end up a solid film, which was a good way of shutting up the Marvel critics who claim everyone has to have a movie first before teaming up. But speaking of people getting their own movie, let's address that criticism that even critics like the overrated grifting so-called critical drinker likes to whip out. Everyone is supposed to get a movie first before teaming up. It's a golden rule because a company that mostly just makes dumb popcorn flicks does it. So DC must do it too, I guess. Piss off. A bunch of you later started complaining about having to watch so many Marvel movies to keep up with what's going on, and now such a request looks quite foolish now, doesn't it? I don't even think a character like Cyborg could even hold a movie on his own or even have it make big bucks or break even. Hence why it makes sense that his story was told within a Justice League film. Superman had his, which started everything, and enough of Batman's backstory is shown or heavily alluded to in BvS. People can infer what Batman is about anyway. He's the biggest hero out there, only being rivaled by Spider-Man. And weren't you the same bozos complaining about having to see Batman's parents be killed for the 100th time? Even though that scene is usually handled in a pretty short fashion. Like, make up your minds. No, we have to be shown his movie first. We can't just assume and infer things about this adaptation. Oh, really? Well, if you can't make assumptions about this adaptation, then Batman killing shouldn't be a problem in the first place anymore, right? Since it isn't a heavily established rule in this adaptation, right? Pick and choose as usual for a character that killed in his comic debut in tandem with BvS being closer to its comic inspiration, The Dark Knight Returns, more so than any live-action superhero film other than Watchmen, which is another Snyder movie. Don't even get me started on the MCU comic 180s, they're much bigger. But anyway, like, comment, and subscribe if you think for yourself, unlike these cucks I'm happily dunking on while only using 8% of my power. Now, I know these examples are different as these characters are never supposed to be standalone, but imagine bringing this complaint up to something like X-Men or the Fantastic Four. I couldn't really enjoy this X-Men film. Storm, Nightcrawler, or Beast should have had their movie first before appearing in X-Men. They're, too underdeveloped. Even outside of the superhero genre, you have these brain-dead buffoons pretending that the Lord of the Rings trilogy doesn't exist, which is one of the most critically acclaimed and successful franchises in history. In the opening film, not the third like Zack Snyder's Justice League, mind you, the first film, Fellowship of the Ring, there are 9 people in the Fellowship alone, which isn't even counting other major characters. who we had never seen at all before leading up to the film. But we are supposed to believe that introducing the Flash, Aquaman, and Cyborg, merely 3 characters in a film, is overwhelming and confusing to audiences. Who am I kidding? Realistically speaking, most of these people who complain about this in the first place don't watch anything other than superhero movies. The mid-MCU ones at that, even before Endgame, and are chronically online, and most definitely don't represent the general public. My buddy Resikin is going to get into this upcoming film that will set off the new superhero universe, which is already covered in controversy for many reasons we don't have time to get into, but might sound familiar as yet another blatant double standard.
Yo, what's good? I'm back and ready to help. Yes sir, Resikin is in the house. But seriously, I remember watching BvS for the first time in 2022, and one of the hypest parts of the film, to me at least, was the quick scene where Batman goes through Lex's files and sees that he's been monitoring the other members of the not yet formed Justice League. So you better believe that it came as a massive shock to me that apparently it's one of the most hated parts of the film. At least the internet hives, because of how it supposedly overstuffed the film. Yeah, okay, it was a 3-minute tease, guys, and did nothing to derail the film, but I guess people go off of whatever others tell them to think these days, even if it is self-contradicting. And this double standard is even more blatantly obvious with the new upcoming Superman film, because honestly, at this point, I don't know what's more ridiculous. The sheer number of characters in the first movie of a new franchise, or the fact that that state of the matter is so understated by those same critics who screeched our ears out over 3 characters being introduced in the 5th film of the DCEU. Yes, you heard that right, 3. It's absolutely ridiculous, because in this new MCU reboot, DCEU reboot, the opening film is called nothing but Superman. No Dawn of Justice subtitle or anything like that, nope, just Superman. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, other than the fact that the title used to be Superman Legacy, but after a lot of internet jokes and memeing about it being called Super L, Gunn, being the deeply insecure Reddit mod that he is, couldn't handle it and ended up changing the name. Truly, this man is lurking in more fan threads than I am, and believe me, that is really saying something. Anyway, getting back on track, from the villains alone that are gonna be in this movie, let's see. So we've got Lex Luthor. I mean, that's cool, I got no problem with that. He's in most Superman films anyway. Then we got this random character called the Engineer, who's also gonna be involved. Then there's this dude in a power suit called the Hammer of Boravia, who, to be fair, could just be one of the other villains in a power suit, so let's just give it the benefit of the doubt and not count it on the list. Ultraman is definitely a new villain, and then you've got Eve Tessmaker, or Tessmaker, or Tessmaker. Okay, I don't know how to pronounce it. But anyway, I'm not gonna count her as a villain, since Lex had Mercy Graves in BvS, just to be fair. But then you've got Maxwell Lord, CEO of Lord Tech, and then you've got Metamorpho, and then you've got that giant CGI monster who escaped the Lilo and Stitch VFX room. And then we might even have Solaris the Tyrant's son, based on some of the leaks and official images from Superman. So let's recap, shall we? We've got Stitch's older brother, Metamorpho, Maxwell Lord, Ultraman, the Engineer, Lex Luthor, and possibly Solaris? What is that, 5 or 6 villains minimum? That is actually insane. I don't think we've ever gotten a movie with this many villains right off the bat. I mean, even Spider-Man 3, which got so much crap for having too many villains, was the 3rd installation, yet only had 3. This is quite literally double. I mean, holy shiatsu. To be fair, you can say that Zack Snyder's Justice League has 2 main villains, but does it really though? It's really just Steppenwolf. I mean, sure, you have Darkseid, but he's kind of in the background the whole time as, like, you know, the big bad. And for the sake of argument, let's just include Desaad, who really is just there as the messenger between these 2 villains, but alright, let's just give it to him. In a 4-hour movie, which is the 5th installation of the DCEU. Meanwhile, this is up to 9 villains, almost in what, 2.5 hours? What are the critics gonna say? Oh, I know.
Oh, it's normal. It's fine. James Gunn is an incredible writer. He knows how to handle this many characters.
no. I mean, that's not even remotely true. I mean, I honestly strongly disagree with that, because as someone who's actually read the comics that James Gunn adapts, or at least adapts the characters from, it's pretty obvious that once he has too many characters, what he does to the ones he doesn't know how to handle is just turn them into jokes. With Adam Warlock being the most egregious example of this, and hey, you could even say the same for Mantis or Drax, and to be fair, don't get me wrong, I love Drax, I love Gunn's adaptation of him, but he's certainly not comic accurate. I mean, even Nebula, who was initially one of the few legitimately intriguing characters in the MCU, at least under the Russos, due to her dark past and all the trauma she experienced being the unfavored daughter of Thanos, once she was in the hands of Gunn, especially in the third movie, she just became another idiot like the rest of the band. And yeah, those movies aren't bad, don't get me wrong, but it's not DC and it's certainly not Superman. Anyway, getting back to the Superman movie, as for the heroes, apparently we're getting the Justice League from Ohio. And yeah, I'm making Ohio jokes in 2025 because I'm from the Midwest, so fight me. No, I don't mean the Justice Society, because the Justice Society, as a matter of fact, preceded the Justice League. That being said, Black Adam, which introduced them, actually did a phenomenal job of bringing them into the mix, which, by the way, was also criticized by consumers for being
overstuffed.
Chronically Online soy boys whined about how they should have had
Solo movies first.
Huh? What? Did anyone really want an Atom Smasher movie? Or a Cyclone limited series? Yet, for some reason, I have a sneaking suspicion that such awful nitpicks won't be hurled at Guy Gardner for not getting his own series before this supposedly Superman Alone film. Give me a break. So, going back to Black Adam, that film actually had 5 heroes including Black Adam, and over here we have just the same, including Superman, or maybe that's Bizarro, I don't know, because, you know, in some shots he looks really heroic, and then in other shots he looks like that. Maybe there's gonna be like a bait and switch or something, I don't know. What? Wait. No, my producer's whispering something in my ear. Oh, it's the same cinematographer as The Flash? But seriously, other than Superman and maybe, or maybe not Bizarro, we have the Justice Gang. And no, I'm not making fun of them, that's literally what they're called, at least officially. Who each look like they got their suits from Temu. Mr. Terrific, Guy Gardner, and Hawkgirl, whose CGI looks pulled right out of The Flash, especially when compared to Hawkman. Just like everything else from this film. I mean, look at this side by side, it's honestly embarrassing. Then we also have Crypto, speaking of CGI dog, and yes, I'm counting the dog as a character because literally 90% of the promotion for this film has been around the dog, and assumedly the story as well. There you have it, 5 heroes, 5, and anything between the range of 6 to 9 villains. No, not 69 villains, 6 to 9 villains, depending on how you count the mystery ones, in a single movie. And critics, what are they gonna say? Nothing. No complaints, no overstuffed accusations, just
Wow, James Gunn really knows how to juggle a big cast.
Meanwhile, Snyder had 3 new heroes, Aquaman, Flash, Cyborg, in a movie that was 4 hours long, yet people still called it crammed. Not only that, but his movie wasn't even the first film in the universe. It was the 5th. Snyder's Justice League gave Cyborg a full arc. Flash had development. Aquaman was established. Meanwhile, here we're supposed to buy that Gunn's going to do the same for 11 new characters in less time and somehow not turn half of them into punchline machines? I mean, just looking at the trailers alone, they've been launching 20 quips a second, so I wouldn't really get my hopes up about them being actually well fleshed out characters. Yeah, this film is looking more crammed than Arkham Asylum on a Tuesday. Don't believe me, ask Joker. You should see how those British inmates take up half the prison yard. But seriously, this film is still going to get a pass, because the internet critics didn't tell the chronically online masses to be upset about it. If this exact lineup was dropped into a Snyder film, the pitchforks would have been out and about before the trailer even ended. It's the same behavior again. Excuse, criticism, made up issues for directors they don't like, and blind passes for the ones they stan like they're on a payroll. But hey, maybe they attended one of Gunn's parties and are being blackmailed by him to pretend that this looks good.
But beyond those examples, let's get into the meat of the hypocrisy with examples of it within DC. These DC examples are going to be DC media that no one heavily bashes to the hateful extent of Snyder's DC work, despite doing the exact same things just a bit. Justice League and Justice League Unlimited would just drop characters into their show with no significant backstory near their introduction, like Hawkgirl's backstory that would come near the very finale of the show. or various other characters like Green Arrow, Black Canary, Huntress, and the Question that never got their origin story fully delved into for the most part, along with a bunch of superhero characters that were just there and never got a significant plotline or origin story at all, like Vigilante. Now, I'm not saying I have a problem with this, but this isn't any different from what Snyder gets bashed for. If critics kept the same energy, then they would have ate this show alive, but they won't because they're just pick and choose hypocrites who make up excuses to not like things instead of actual objective criticisms or reasons. Now, maybe you can argue this being a TV show instead of a movie as a way to justify it. Sure, but I have more factual cards up my sleeve. The DC animated Justice League movies. Now, people and critics say, oh, you see, this is what the live-action DCEU movies should have been, as if copying and pasting media makes good entertainment. But anyway, let's delve into this hypocrisy that has no excuses. Justice League War did the same thing, but with even more Justice League members. The entire cast makes their first team-up appearance in this movie. Like every single team member. Heavy hitters like Batman and Superman, Green Lantern, Shazam, Wonder Woman, and Flash, unless you're counting Flashpoint. And Cyborg, who gets his origin story told within the film similar to Snyder's League. Although I will say I enjoyed the telling of it much more in Snyder's League, where he was the heart of the story. But yeah, this is pretty much objectively contradictory. All the crap that Snyder gets bashed for happens in this movie. People complained about Darkseid losing in his first scene to gods like Zeus after he went ham and killed the Green Lantern with ease in Snyder's work. But in the animated version, Darkseid loses an eye to a crowbar of all things. That crap would barely work on Killer Croc, let alone a planetary or universal threat like Darkseid. They could have tightened up the writing a little and have Flash snatch Wonder Woman's sword to use instead, but no. Even that Snyder criticism itself is dumb because these are likely the same people who saw something even worse than the Flash moment I described, where a huge city or world level threat like Starro got taken out by a human like Harley Quinn using a basic spear, and then let that slide, because Gunn can do no wrong even though his Squad movie bombed and didn't get close to making half as much as the first Squad movie that had far more cultural impact via dominating the costume sales. Feel free to cope with sketchy streaming numbers on a dead streaming service that doesn't have a button on a remote, but anyway. You could only imagine the insane blowback Snyder would have got if he had that happen to Darkseid. Cucks like Cosmonaut would have bitched to the moon about it in a way that would make Karens look agreeable. I'm not done yet though. The death of Superman where the Justice League shows up to fight Doomsday. Hawkman and Martian Manhunter are just a part of the League with zero introduction at all. Even less than what Snyder did with Martian Manhunter, as it's literally no intro at all for characters that are aliens, Martian Manhunter being a pretty powerful one at that who can read minds. Slightly unrelated, but similar to the crowbar taking out Darkseid's eye, there's plenty of minor nicks in these films that people just look past. They try to portray Superman as the saving people from danger type, which is what people roasted Snyder for not doing in Man of Steel, even though he's fighting someone just as fast as him, and it wouldn't really be realistically possible for him to save people in such havoc against someone deliberately trying to kill as many people as possible in his fight against Superman. People like to forget that he snapped Zod's neck just to save a family, but anyway. A few of those animated films honestly sort of feel like they're trying to stick it to Snyder, but it gets done in ways that are dumb, like Superman taking his sweet ass time to console some kid while Doomsday could easily be killing more people and wreaking even more havoc, along with Superman killing Doomsday with a huge Quake level punch while Lois is 1 meter away from Doomsday. She would be complete mush after that. People complained about Snyder's Luthor, but then we have this moment, which is even more awful as he whines like a literal toddler, despite assumably being around the age of 30.
No! I'm supposed to win!
I mean, even Gunn's new Lex looks perpetually on the verge of tears. Like, he's a toddler and his mom just told him, no, you can't ride the go-karts for the 5th time, we have to go home now. He just has that dumb expression on his face every time we've seen him in promotion. That, and the fact that his line deliveries are kinda awkward, which is either due to Gunn's poor direction or writing, or the fact that the actor himself, Nicholas Hoult, might just not have the best grasp on the American accent as a Tuesday tea sipper himself.
Going back to Justice League War, people complained about Snyder's Superman behaving less like a goody two-shoes Boy Scout and more like a conflicted introvert, but then we have Superman behaving like a school jock stereotype. Wonder Woman in this one scene behaves like a teenage girl, despite likely being around 100 years old. I know she's a fish out of water when it comes to modern society, but it shouldn't be this juvenile.
Need to come back to the White House.
You sound like my mother.
There's more it can nitpick or tear apart in those animated films, like extremely noticeable continuity errors like Superman being in the background of a scene he's not even in, or Wonder Woman going from having red demon skin to having normal skin between shots, but I won't bloat this video any further. Overall, I think the DC animated movies were decent before a bunch of the new ones became far too filler and mid to bother watching outside of stumbling upon it in the shorts feed, as a lot of them are just mediocre or slightly above average, and some straight up approach being bad apart from some great exceptions, with my list here being the only films that are on par or not too far beneath Snyder's work when it comes to having a deep, compelling plot with heavy themes. But outside of that list, most of the DC animated films seem to be DC but for dumber DC fans, similar to most of the CW content, but without hitting the CW's insane lows or milking quite as badly. I think Snyder's Justice League trilogy definitely outdoes most of them. Justice League shows are still fairly great, etc., but back on topic. The reason I did this whole comparison of DC content was to point out these objective double standards, as no one bashes these movies or shows, even though they should based upon their petty nitpick criticisms if they weren't hypocrites. Hell, there's also some Marvel examples as far back as Hawkeye from the first Avengers movie, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, various Spider-Verse characters to the point where the second Spider-Verse film didn't even get to end properly like Spider-Man 3 did. And speaking of Spider-Man, we have a heavy hitter like Spider-Man and Black Panther who didn't have intros when they appeared in Civil War, which was a movie that came out around the same time as BvS, by the way. But anyway, I'll end off this video with the perfect term I made up for these dummies in my Padme and Anakin video that I'm yet to remaster. The thing that these cuck critics like to do is what I like to call excuse criticism, where many of the dookie critics don't have an actual significant objective problem with a film that punched above their mental pay grade with more real-world themes, so they instead latch upon the most minor of details and blow it out of proportion to sell their crappy, biased, subjective hive mind take. Or in this case, just make up an issue that isn't really a problem to them, as they haven't bitched about it in other forms of similar media I've delved into in this video. I know I'm harsh with a lot of these defense videos, but the cucks I'm referring to deserve to be called out on their stupid highs of points they didn't even make themselves. These negative 82 brain cell bitches deserve to be taken to the dumpster behind the back of a circus where they belong. Saying the word cramming when everyone's intro or brief tease only took place within a 3-minute scene. Did these cuck critics not think about roughly counting the minutes of screen time before putting out their dookie review? And then you have a bunch of drones that copy and paste those criticisms, some of which or most of which didn't even watch the movie or didn't watch it with their thinking cap on. And these are the same people who think DC will be saved by some hidden PDF offender who mostly makes dumb flicks that contain dumb jokes like a guy sucking off dongs on a beach. He'll damn what little remains of DC. I know I'll get flack for it, but I have no shame in the way I say these objective statements. I'm taking the condescending energy that these illogical cuck critics and their dumb drones use and giving it back to them in a way that actually makes sense. All those cuck critics get to be condescending with their reviews that have objectively incorrect criticism, like Cosmonaut that Tex luckily already did a great job tearing apart. But despite Cuckmanot having objectively false points, his review is the most viewed BvS review on YouTube, which goes to show the level of critical thinking humanity has. Point is, that loser gets to be condescending, but it's a problem when I do it with points that can't be torn apart in an objective fashion. But whatever, now that I'm done effortlessly dunking on these dumbasses and bashing these bots, I hope you guys enjoyed this inarguable video. I recommend checking out my other videos similar to this, like my Snyder Batman defense, or even my Star Wars prequel defenses. Leave comments, even if they are mean ones that try to argue against these points, where your odds of debunking me will be as good as beating Doomsday. Even if Gunn's new film is a bomb like most of his DC productions, I still unfortunately highly doubt that the criticism will be it's overstuffed, simply because critics on the internet didn't tell the chronically online comic book movie crowd to run with that talking point. But anyway, thanks for watching.